Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished coach from Coimbatore, India, Kavita Neelakantan. Kavita, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Well, it's a pleasure to be on this show called Brand Called You with you.
Thank you. Kavita is the founder of Kavyata, which is preparing people for the future of work. She's a career and leadership coach. So, Kavita, before we start talking of Kavyata, tell me in brief your own journey.
Great. So I'll start from where it all, the seeds of Kavyata began. And that was perhaps my 2 years at IIM Ahmedabad, where I was exposed to a very transformational program called Exploring Roles and Identity, and by one of our senior professors, Professor Indira Parekh. And that was one of those courses, which made me feel that until now, all my education has been about learning about the outside. But this is a course which starts making me think about the inside, and learning about the inside, which is about me in particular. So that's where the seeds of all this work started. And since then, I've been on this journey of understanding self and therefore, working in the area of personal growth and mindset change. So that's where the journey began. And it's been fairly winding, and maybe I'll talk more about that as we go further in this conversation.
Thank you. So let's talk about Kavyata now. It's obviously a name that is a combination of Kavita and someone else. So tell me about the venture and your motivation to start it.
Yes. So in fact, curiously enough, it is not a combination of Kavita and something else. And it sounds like that. And I was very fortunate to have stumbled upon this name. Kavyata actually means wisdom in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking about what to name my venture, and I came across this word, and it so struck me because, what I think is that at this right now, we have like unprecedented opportunities in the world of work. So we could be sitting here and working with global organizations. There's upskilling opportunities like never before, and you have so many diverse career choices. And yet, people are missing something at work. They feel stuck in their careers, and you must have heard of that Great Resignation, which was So it's curious and so that's what made me start thinking about it. And Kavyata, meaning wisdom, in fact means what I want to do through this venture is to help bring people wisdom in their lives at work. So wisdom is about deepening, not just having knowledge and information, but deepening an understanding of yourself so that you can make sense of all these opportunities, all the promises, promising opportunities which are there in the current world of work, and make it personal, use it for yourself, and therefore bring wisdom to your own world of work. So that's where Kavyata began.
So Kavita, for my viewers and listeners, can you give me an example without any names of how you've helped bring wisdom?
Yes, sure. So some of the people that I work with are mostly, people who have almost like 2 decades plus of experience in the corporate world. But that's also the time when you need to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And today, more than ever, there is a need for us to constantly keep upgrading and reinventing ourselves. Now, wisdom at work actually starts playing out because we need to be able to shift our inner narrative of who we are when we need to make these kinds of career transitions and reinvent ourselves. And that's where we need to understand not only what is out there, but also how am I in relation to what is out there. And that's the part about applying wisdom to myself at work. So when I work with, for instance, senior professionals who worked in a certain industry for a long time and now are reaching the point where they're asking themselves, what next? How do I reinvent myself? Then wisdom is about, really holding their hand, supporting them to be able to shift that inner narrative.
Fascinating. And, when I was reading about you, I was fascinated to read about the T-shaped expertise. Help me understand T-shaped expertise in the context of coaching.
Okay, so T-shaped expertise, I think when we understand the concept of T-shaped expertise, it implies a breadth of experiences and then focused or specialized knowledge in a few areas. So
Mm.
my journey, as I was telling you, has been fairly diverse.
Mm.
So I've been a researcher and social entrepreneur. I've been a writer.
Mm.
I've been a stay-at-home mom for some time.
Mm. Mm.
And then I've spent a large part of my career in the area of adult learning, facilitation, and coaching.
Okay.
So a breadth of these experiences is what contributes to the T-shaped
Mm.
expertise. And what it enables me to do is to connect with people from very different kinds of backgrounds.
Mm.
So to be able to, because I've lived so many different kinds of
Correct.
personas myself,
Mm.
so it enables me to bring all of that into my work when I work with, coaching people,
Yeah.
especially around the area of career reinvention.
Mm. Interesting. So my next question to you, Kavita, is, and I'm much older than you. When I finished my MBA in 1979 and then, early years, mentoring or coaching was either done by a family elder
Hmm.
or a senior colleague who took a liking for you.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, what has changed over the years that today coaching has
Hmm.
become a profession and people are willing to pay for it?
Right. Very true. In fact, I'm very glad you asked this question because I think the change that you've spoken about, that,
Mm.
the kind of structures and organizations have evolved to a great extent, right?
Correct.
And people do not stick with organizations long enough for them to be able to develop those kinds of relationships,
Mm.
the kind that you described, right?
Yeah.
When you had a boss or a mentor who's looking out for you and who you have that close personal rapport with, and you can trust them to give you the direction and steer your
Mm.
career
Mm.
forward.
Mm.
Today we don't stay in organizations that long. There is neither do we, nor do our bosses perhaps, right?
Mm.
So so then and yet, like more than ever before, you need a person to give you perspectives that you may be missing, because simply there is the pace of work is such that you don't always have the time for reflection.
Mm.
There is a constant pace of action,
Mm.
and coaching is the space which people therefore then create for themselves to really necessarily create a place for reflection as well.
Mm.
So all that action has to be brought into reflection for it to actually create wisdom. So that
Fascinating.
is why I think people are turning more and more to coaching, because they feel the need to bring this reflection into their lives
Mhm.
and to create a pause.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Kavita, when you look at your own background, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, social sector, writer, stay at home mom, founder of Kavyata, how has your background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Hmm. So I think I would, as I said, because it's been very diverse
Hmm.
and in many ways a non-linear career before the term non-linear actually became
Correct.
popular as it is today. So
Hmm.
I've kind of lived those tribulations, those feelings of uncertainty, the difficulties that come with reinventing yourself. I've experienced that, so that has in a great way contributed to my the approach that I bring to coaching.
Hmm.
Beyond that, it's also, I think, because my work has been, I've spent a lot of time working in the area of personal growth,
Hmm.
and it's been influenced by, I think, multiple areas, especially Indic wisdom,
Hmm.
working on myself,
Yeah.
working with yoga for myself. So
Hmm.
all of these are influences which have come into my coaching, and I would also think that because I always believe that there are multiple possibilities in every individual.
Hmm.
Coming from my own experience, that is something which I see, and I'm able to, in some sense, bring that out in the people that I work with,
Hmm.
which allows them to see themselves in different ways.
Very interesting.
And yeah, and then even in terms of values, it's about valuing the uniqueness of each individual. So
Hmm.
that, I think, if we are able to see, then we also see the multiple possibilities which can exist in front of us.
Fascinating. And you spoke about personal growth.
Mhm.
Help me understand what are the areas you're focusing on for personal growth before I move to the next question.
Right. I think personal growth for me has been in the area of coaching. It applies a lot to really understanding myself, and how do I shift my own, the way I see myself, so that I can open up to new possibilities, whether it's at work, whether it's in terms of, relationships, whether it's the way that I see the world. Because a lot of times that's all of us that happens to all of us, that we get, stuck in our own patterns of thinking and behaving. So personal growth is about being able to see that. And I think at the very heart of it, it is about, in some sense, self acceptance and self love. Because if
Right.
you can touch that,
Mm.
then everything else becomes a much easier route from there onwards.
Mm.
So if that's what I
Very
try and enable in my work.
fascinating. And, most of us have, a lot of individuals who we interact with in our journey of
Mhm.
life. My question to you is, given the incredible amount of areas you have touched in your
Mhm.
life so far, how have you been shaped by some of the people in your life, and how are they influencing you as a coach today?
So this again takes me back to my days at IIM.
Yeah.
And, so as I had shared with you that one of the most transformational programs was this course called Exploring Roles and Identity by our, professor
Mhm.
of organization behavior, Professor Indira Parekh. And she's been one of the most influential people for me, because
Mhm.
I decided to get into the space of personal growth because of her,
Okay.
the way
Mm.
that she used to work with us.
Mm.
That, and then there was also another person during my IIM days,
Mm.
Mr. Sunil Handa, and he's a very leading educationist. And influenced by him, I think I got very interested in the space of alternative education.
Okay.
So that's also something which I've spent a lot of time in.
Mm.
And of course, beyond that, I would say that in a very day-to-day way, some of the most important influences on me have been my parents, because my mother, she was also an XLRI alumnus. She used to work in the space of, people development.
Mhm.
So those fundamental influences come from there.
Mm.
And I think my dad was also, a non-conformist, didn't have, although in those days, because opportunities were fewer, he had a traditional career with
Yeah.
Tata Motors. But,
Mm.
he's a singer. And I used to always feel that if these are the kinds of possibilities which I need to enable,
Mm.
so, and I feel very happy that today the world of work is such that we have an opportunity to bring these multiple selves into, the work that we do.
Wonderful. What amazing influences you've had. Kavita, you also said that you bring a blend of a writer and a creative soul with management expertise.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd love to get your perspective on this, but before that, tell me a little bit about writing, because I'm very partial to authors.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I think, yes, I've always had this. I think I write better than I speak. You know,
Okay.
I feel much more when I can put pen to paper, I it just starts flowing. Ideas just
Mm.
start
Mm.
flowing.
Mm.
Thoughts just start pouring out.
Mm.
So when I say writer and a creative soul, what really happens to me when I write is that, just like writers, when you said you're partial to authors, you must realize, for instance, say Harry Potter. When you read that, you know that J.K. Rowling didn't start with the end in mind, right? Those characters develop a life of their own. So
Mm.
when I work with people, even in coaching, when I see people, they actually they don't feel as if there are still so many things which are left to be built up in
Right.
the personas. So that's
Mm.
how, when I look at people, I see them like characters in a book. Like, you can build them up, and there are all these fascinating possibilities which
Mm.
exist. So
Mm.
that's the writer and creative part of me which
Fantastic.
I touch. And
Mm.
then it finally comes to management thinking. Of course, is a lot about,
Yeah.
convergence, and writing and creativity is divergence. So I start from the place of divergence, because that's where I think at heart I am.
Mm.
And then it comes to the head, and, converging and helping people really follow through on certain paths that they've chosen. And how do you make that happen in a way that feels, structured, and feels like it's moving towards a certain desired end.
Mm. How
So that's
fascinating.
the way. Yeah.
And the reason I say I'm partial to authors is because I'm a published author of 8 books.
Mhm.
And I'm working on my 9th. And I have a lot of respect for people who are willing to write and put their thoughts out in the open.
Yes, yes, that's true.
And be open to criticism,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this whole thing is all about you today. So my next question to you, Kavita, is that given the fact that you are a coach
Hmm.
and, we are such an amazingly diverse country
Mhm.
with, cross-cultural, impact keeps happening in all our lives.
Hmm.
My question to you is, how does culture, in your opinion, impact coaching?
Okay, so culture and the way that you're talking about culture is as in Indian culture, right? Are you
Correct.
talking about?
So, no, so the reason I'm saying this is there are
Hmm,
many people I speak to and I've worked with in the past. The
hmm,
standard thing is let my work do the talking. When I
hmm,
speak to an American, the standard thing is I did this, I did this, I did this.
hmm, hmm.
We come from different backgrounds. Some people are able to express themselves better, some not.
Right.
I wanted to get your perspective on culture and coaching.
Okay. So I think right now, if we're talking about the kind of people who are seeking out coaching,
Mm,
uh, you wouldn't find them very different in India and from their global
absolutely.
counterparts.
Mm,
So
mm,
to that extent, there is a certain acceptance of or a desire and an aspiration to have this kind of support for and I think the global culture has influenced our us as Indians also
mm,
and fundamentally, I think as Indians, we also have this desire to seek, and that is now getting
mm,
avenues. So
mm,
whether it is in terms of asking questions and working with coaches, or it is, being in general
mm,
trying to figure out newer opportunities, there is that seeking culture in us. So,
mm.
and that is what we probably see even when in coaching. And apart from that, of course, organizations also have their own cultures, which
Correct.
are sometimes more enabling and more supportive of
Yeah.
coaching, and especially when they value, their people as whole individuals, not just like the work part of you. And those organizations tend to be very supportive of coaching and
Mm,
their people seeking out such
mm.
interventions.
Very interesting. My next question to you is that no, this is the age of the millennials and the Gen Zs.
Hmm.
And millennials and Gen Z, and I'm from what you would call the baby boomers age. But the millennials and the Gen Zs are now reaching positions of influence, leadership roles, etc. And they're an amazing set of people.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to get your perspective on what are the areas millennials and Gen Zs or the young leaders need to be coached in.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of young leaders, and I feel very energized when I do that. So,
Absolutely.
and I teach at some of the IIMs. So there you end up working with people who are anywhere from 22 to 30,
Correct.
So what happens is what I see in the younger leaders
Mhm.
is a lot of, clarity about their aspirations.
Mhm.
They have the courage also to follow, to want to move towards their aspirations. And perhaps where they need a little bit of support is actually creating that pause, because
Mm,
they're really geared towards action, you
mm,
know
mm,
and in that sometimes the space for reflection, the space to take a pause and to make sense of all that is happening
mm,
is what they seek, what they need the most. And
mm,
coaching really helps them to get that pause for reflection.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that's where I think Gen Z and millennials, coaching and they are very action oriented. They're very bold and aspirational, and this provides a sort of a supporting framework for them.
Very interesting. So, Kavita, I have time for 2 more questions. My next question is with regard to evaluation of a coach. I've often been asked this question.
Hmm.
How does a coachee determine that I have a good coach?
Okay. I will tell you from my own experiences
Absolutely.
of having been coached as well.
Okay.
Okay. So at many times I have had fortunate to have really good coaches and mentors that I've worked with. So when one is that there is an instant, shift in your energy.
Mm,
which and it doesn't always have to be the clarity, the energy, it doesn't come the first time. But
Correct.
even if your interaction with the coach can leave you feeling in some way as if energized, because you've got something, a different kind of a perspective. You also sometimes feel very different. You feel that yes, this is something which I hadn't experienced before actually, and sometimes you can even feel it in your body. The way that you feel in your energy after
Yeah.
having spoken to somebody like that. So that these are some of the ways. And of course, if you at the start of any sort of coaching relationship, it's important to clarify what is it that you would like to, what are some broad areas that you would like support on. And
Mm.
each time you have a conversation, you feel that yes, I'm moving, inching towards it.
Mm.
Even if it's not like an overnight process, but then that is what makes the feeling, makes that engagement, that relationship,
Right.
like it is working for me.
Fascinating. And my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. What would you say, based on your amazing journey so far, are three lessons you want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own learnings, your journey, and from our conversation?
Right. So I think the first very important one would be that really be open to all kinds of new experiences,
Yeah.
because that's where you find so many different perspectives, so many different ways of seeing the world.
Mm.
And that is perhaps, more and more we need to be able to develop that mental and emotional agility to be able to, steer our careers forward. And that comes from being open to new experiences. So
Correct.
that's the first, the
Yeah.
most important perhaps the experience that I've had and which I would like to share with others.
Yeah.
And the other would be that that there is always your careers are our careers are fairly long.
Mm.
There's really no in fact, sustainable careers are more important than successful
Mm.
at
Mm.
a very rapid pace.
Mm.
So it's important to invest in ourselves over the longer haul of our careers,
Yeah.
and that includes investing in ourselves in mentally, emotionally,
Mm.
physically, spiritually, because
Yeah.
all of that comes together to create a sustainable and successful
Yeah.
career, right? And that's the second. And I think the third thing is really have fun. And I read a beautiful book, very small, a children's
Mm.
book. So sometimes the best things you read in children's books. So this
Correct.
one is called Giraffes Can Dance.
Mm.
And it's about this giraffe who used to think that, everybody in the jungle, all the other animals used to say that, you're no good at dancing. You're the most clumsy person and the clumsiest dancer and all of that. So the giraffe was very disappointed and he was sad. But then a monkey came along and started playing the drums, and the giraffe then, suddenly found his rhythm, and the way
Mm.
then the giraffe started dancing. So actually, the lesson here is that everyone can dance. The
Yeah.
giraffe can also dance if the music is right.
Yeah.
And to find that, sometimes you need to be able to have that friend, have that, somebody in your life who's going to give you that kind of music. So
Mm.
watch out and for such people and keep them around you.
How interesting. Kavita, on that note, and your three amazing lessons, be open to all types of experiences. Careers are long and sustainable. Invest in yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And third one, have fun, which all three seem to lead to the same three words that you have articulated: find your rhythm in
Hmm.
life and at work. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey, about Kavyata, about coaching, about writing, and about all the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.